Good day, mate. It's Mrs. Wolbrin.
Surprise, it's Mrs. Klein.
We're here with another podcast for Lesson 15. This is going to be Section 5, but just keep in mind Lesson 15, Manifest Destiny in the Growing Nation, with your guiding question that we review every day in class.
Absolutely.
How justifiable was U.S. expansion in the 1800s?
And those vocabulary words again: annex, diplomacy, manifest destiny, Mexican-American War, territory, and the Texas War for Independence.
Okay, now we're going to start talking about the Mexican-American War. Now, you might think that Texas and Oregon were sufficient new territory for any president, but not for Polk. This humorless, hardworking president had one great goal of expanding the United States as far as possible.
Oh my gosh, like humorous and hardworking. Those are like, I don't want to be the hardworking guy, but humorless, I don't know. Okay, all right, but single-minded, I guess. We've got like single focus. All right, Polk's gaze fell next on the huge areas known as California and New Mexico. He was determined to have them both, by purchase if possible, by force if necessary.
These areas were first colonized by Spain, but became Mexican territories when Mexico won its independence in 1821. Now, Polk sent a representative to Mexico to try to buy the territories, but Mexican officials refused even to see Polk's representative.
There we go. All right, so war breaks out in Texas. When Congress voted to annex Texas, relations between the United States and Mexico turned sour. Mexico considered the annexation of Texas an act of war. And to make matters worse, Texas and Mexico could not agree on a border. Texas claimed the Rio Grande as its border on the south and the west, whereas Mexico wanted the border to be the Nueces River, about 150 miles northeast of the Rio Grande.
Okay, now on April 25th, 1846, Mexican soldiers fired on U.S. troops who were patrolling along the Rio Grande. 16 Americans were killed or wounded. This was just the excuse for a war that Polk had been waiting for. Mexico, he charged, had invaded our territory and shed American blood upon American soil. 2 days after Polk's speech, Congress declared war on Mexico, starting the Mexican-American War.
Okay, all right. Now, the fall of New Mexico and California happened here. All right, a few months later, General Stephen Kearny led the Army of the West out of Kansas with orders to occupy New Mexico and then continue west to California. Mexican opposition melted away in front of Kearny's, and I think they may even pronounce his last name Kearny, but I think it is, but it looks like Kearny, with Kearny's army, and the Americans took control of New Mexico without firing a shot.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a group of Americans launched a rebellion against Mexican rule in California.
All right. When Kearny reached California, he joined forces with the rebels. Within weeks, all of California was under U.S. control.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the United States invades Mexico. The conquest of Mexico itself was far more difficult. U.S. forces invaded Mexico from two directions. General Taylor, Zachary Taylor, who goes on to become president later, marched south from Texas to the Mexican city of Monterrey, near a ranch called Buena Vista. Taylor met 15,000 Mexican soldiers led by Santa Anna. After 2 days, Santa Anna retreated. The war in northern Mexico ended.
All right, but in southern Mexico, a second force led by General Winfield Scott landed at Veracruz and moved toward Mexico City. Despite fierce resistance by Mexican soldiers, Mexico City fell to Scott in September of 1847.
Yeah. And again, just despite determined resistance, Scott's army captured Mexico City in September of 1847. And watching from a distance, this is kind of funny, a Mexican officer muttered darkly, "God is a Yankee."
Whatever, God must be on our side. All right, all that manifest destiny, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we were destined to take over. All right, so now the war comes to a close and we sign a treaty that's called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. In early 1848, Mexico and the United States signed this treaty. Okay, Mexico agreed to give up Texas and a vast region known as the Mexican Cession. A cession is something that is given up. This area included present-day states of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, as well as parts of Colorado and Wyoming. So it's a big chunk of land.
Huge chunk. Under this agreement, Mexico gave up half of all of its territory. And in return, the United States agreed to pay Mexico $15 million. It also promised to protect the 80,000 to 100,000 Mexicans living in Texas and the Mexican Cession. Most of these promises, however, were not kept.
Okay, all right. Now, this leaves like one little stretch of land that we still want to get our hands on, and it's known as the Gadsden Purchase. A few years later, the United States acquired still more land from Mexico. In 1853, James Gadsden arranged the purchase of a strip of land just south of the Mexican cession for $10 million. Railroad builders wanted this land because it was relatively flat and could serve as a good railroad route. The acquisition of this land, known as the Gadsden Purchase, created the present-day border of the southwestern United States with Mexico.
Okay. Now, we just want to review with you guys this whole lesson, lesson 15, Manifest Destiny, right? We've learned about how the United States acquired all these different territories. So, going back, the Louisiana Purchase. As you remember, in 1803, the United States added this vast territory known as Louisiana, which doubled the nation's land area. This territory also gave the United States control of the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans, ensuring farmers west of the Appalachians that they could get their crops to market.
All right, and then also how we acquire Florida. After Andrew Jackson marched into Florida and removed the Spanish governor, President Monroe gave Spain the option to govern the territory properly or get out. In 1819, to avoid going to war, Spain signed a treaty that gave Florida to the United States.
Okay, and then Texas. In 1836, Americans in Texas rebelled against the Mexican government. After the Texans' devastation at the Alamo, the Texas Revolutionary Army defeated the Mexican army, leading to the creation of the Lone Star Republic. In 1845, Congress admitted Texas into the Union. And in 1846, the Lone Star Republic was formally dissolved.
All right, that leads us to the Oregon Country. As routes westward were established, thousands of Americans settled in the Oregon Country, and soon there was a drive to annex all of Oregon. In 1846, to avoid going to war, the United States signed a treaty with Great Britain and added half of the Oregon Country.
And lastly, war with Mexico. In 1846, the United States went to war with Mexico in the Mexican-American War. In an 1848 treaty with Mexico, the United States acquired present-day states of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, as well as parts of Colorado and Wyoming. In 1853, the Gadsden Purchase added land that completed the outline of the continental United States.
Okay, all right. And then be thinking, you guys, that guiding question again, like how justifiable were each one of those ways in which the United States was able to acquire this new territory and land?
Yeah, because now we are from sea to
Sea
shining
to shining sea, exactly.
All right, guys, take it easy.
All right, later.